From the time humans looked up at the sky, everyone was dreaming of knowing the world above their heads, until in 1969 this dream came true for the world, and the first man set foot on the surface of the moon. When Edwin Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins left Earth for the moon on the Apollo 11 spacecraft on July 16, 1969, many held their breath until July 20, 1969, when the first humans landed on the moon. After that, a series of operations were carried out, in which a total of about 24 people were able to orbit the moon, and about half of this figure was able to set foot on the surface of the moon. Perhaps the first human trip to the moon and the conquest of the moon can be attributed to the space race between Russia and the United States, or perhaps the famous speech of President Kennedy about the need to conquer the moon by the end of this decade, or perhaps investment $25 billion US. Subscribe our YouTube channel to watch the rest of this video and more. In that regard, however, what is clear is that the moon was no longer inaccessible to humans. Some facts about the first human landing on the moon. Mr. Nixon, the President of the United States, had prepared himself for the worst, and the person in charge of writing the president's speeches later said that we had prepared for the worst, and even we had prepared the transcript of our astronaut championships that we had lost. Armstrong's famous speech was misinterpreted because in that speech he said that this is a small step for a man, while it should have been said that this is a small step for humanity, although he later admitted his mistake. The American flag was not the only thing astronauts left on the moon after returning to Earth. Instead, they left many unnecessary items, about 100 on the moon. For example, astronaut boots or several cameras or etc. And the reason for their work, the astronauts also announced that they had provided space for the collected samples and they no longer needed those devices. When the astronauts boarded their spacecraft and wanted to return to Earth, they noticed a problem with the spacecraft combustion system, so it was virtually impossible for them to return to Earth, and they even transmitted the problem to Earth, and after a while the astronauts decided they took action and were able to solve the problem on their own, and start their journey to Earth. The astronauts had severe nutritional problems during the trip because the drinking water supply was severely hampered in those conditions and they were consuming too many substandard elements and therefore had several nutritional problems. The original footprints of the spacecraft's own cameras have been lost, and the images of those cameras are much clearer than what is now available for the public. Neil Armstrong disembarked from the spacecraft before Aldrin and was named the first man on the moon because firstly he had a higher rank than Aldrin and was considered his commander, and secondly Apollo was designed in such a way that Armstrong had to disembark first, later Aldrin can get off. There are many people in the world who believe that the first human trip to the moon never took place and that the trip to the moon was the biggest lie of the 20th century and that the US government was forced to fabricate this story in order to remain in a space competition with Russia. They also believe that this trip is one of the biggest lies in history, and even the film of the first human trip to the moon is fake, and why it is not even seen in the remaining photos of the human trip to the moon by Neil Armstrong. Some points about being fake or not. Studies shows that every few minutes a 1 cm diameter pit appears on the moon as a result of meteorite impact. Now imagine that one of these particles hits an astronaut. What happens? The strange thing is that an organization as great as NASA did not consider this issue and endanger the lives of its astronauts. Another interesting point is the state of the flag, as it is thought to have found this state due to the wind, while there is no wind on the surface of the moon. The Apollo mission to the moon involved thousands of people, but few had complete information about the entire project. NASA had restricted access to the entire project by giving limited tasks to individuals on Apollo missions. A number of 11 Apollo astronauts had strange incidents in 22 months. The strange thing is that they resigned from their jobs after these incidents. After this cruel journey, man never set foot on the moon again, and NASA, despite the passage of more than 40 years of this journey, still does not talk about a trip to the moon, and all the controversy over the possession of the moon left its place in silence, the silence that has continued to this day. and that Neil Armstrong, the first astronaut to set foot on the moon during the historic Apollo 11 spacecraft trip to the moon in 1969, has died at the age of 82, and questions and ambiguities remain about this historic trip.